In the quiet spaces of a home, peace does not shatter all at once, it fades like a lamp slowly losing oil. No storm announces its arrival. Instead, small unseen forces begin their work unnoticed and unchallenged. These are the silent destroyers, the ones rarely named yet deeply felt. The first is unspoken expectation. When the heart silently demands and the lips remain closed, disappointment grows like a shadow. No one can fulfill a wish they cannot see, yet many suffer from hopes never shared. Peace weakens when understanding is replaced by assumption. The second is the habit of not listening. Hearing words is easy, but listening requires presence. When people speak but feel unheard, distance forms even in close proximity. A family may sit together yet feel miles apart. The third is stored resentment. Small hurts, when buried instead of released, do not disappear. They gather strength over time, turning into bitterness. What could have been healed with a moment of honesty becomes a wall of silence. The fourth is comparison. When one life is measured against another, gratitude fades. Instead of seeing what is, the mind clings to what is not. This creates dissatisfaction even where there was once contentment. The fifth is lack of appreciation. Familiarity often blinds the eyes. Acts of care become expected, not valued. A simple thank you left unsaid slowly erodes warmth. The sixth is harsh speech. Words once spoken cannot be recalled. A sharp tone can wound deeper than intention. Even truth delivered without kindness becomes a weapon. The seventh is absence of time. A family cannot grow where presence is missing. Time is the soil in which connection lives. Without it, relationships become fragile. The eighth is ego. The need to be right often outweighs the need to be at peace. When pride leads, harmony follows behind, struggling to keep up. The ninth is neglect of forgiveness. Holding on to past mistakes chains the present moment. Freedom comes not from being right, but from letting go. The 10th is forgetting love in daily actions. Love is not only a feeling, it is practice. It lives in small gestures, patient words, and quiet understanding. When these are forgotten, love becomes distant even if it still exists. Peace in a family is not maintained by grand efforts, but by mindful attention to small things. When awareness replaces habit and compassion replaces reaction, the home becomes a place of rest again. The silent killers lose their power the moment they are seen. And in that seeing, peace begins to return. Unspoken expectations create distance. When people expect without communicating, misunderstandings grow and lead to silent disappointment. Unspoken expectations move quietly through a home, yet their impact is deep and far-reaching. They are born in the mind, shaped by personal desires, past experiences, and silent hopes. One person may expect understanding without explanation, support without asking, or affection without expressing the need for it. But when these expectations remain hidden, they become a source of quiet suffering. The heart begins to feel overlooked, even though the other person may be unaware that anything was ever required of them. In many families, people assume that closeness should bring automatic understanding. They believe that love means knowing without being told. Yet this belief often leads to confusion rather than connection. Each individual carries a different way of thinking, a different emotional language. When expectations are not spoken, they cannot be understood, and when they are not understood, they cannot be fulfilled. What remains is a subtle disappointment that slowly takes root. This disappointment rarely announces itself loudly. It appears in small changes, a colder tone, a shorter response, a fading enthusiasm in conversations. Over time, these small shifts create emotional distance. A person may begin to feel unappreciated or neglected even though no clear conflict has occurred. The silence grows heavier not because of what is said, but because of what is left unsaid. There is also a quiet unfairness in unspoken expectations. It places a burden on others without giving them the chance to respond. Expecting someone to meet a need they do not know exists is like waiting for rain in a sky that shows no clouds. The disappointment that follows is real, but it is rooted in a lack of clarity, not a lack of care. Awareness of this pattern is the first step toward change. When a person begins to observe their own expectations, they may see how often they are formed without expression. In that awareness, there is an opportunity to replace silence with gentle communication. Speaking honestly does not weaken relationships, it strengthens them. It creates space for understanding where both sides can meet without confusion. Peace grows where clarity exists. When expectations are shared with kindness and without demand, they lose their power to harm. They become invitations rather than silent tests. In such an environment, trust deepens because no one is left guessing what the other feels. A family does not lose peace because people expect too much, it loses peace because those expectations remain hidden. When words are used with care and openness, the unseen weight begins to lift. What once created distance can then become a path toward deeper connection, where understanding replaces assumption and harmony returns quietly just as it once faded. Lack of true listening weakens relationships. Hearing without understanding makes family members feel ignored and emotionally disconnected. The absence of true listening is a quiet fracture that often goes unnoticed until the distance it creates becomes too wide to ignore. In many homes, words are exchanged constantly, yet understanding remains rare. People hear each other, but they do not truly listen. Their minds are occupied preparing responses, holding on to judgments, or drifting elsewhere. In this state, conversation becomes shallow and connection begins to weaken. To listen deeply is to be fully present. It requires setting aside the urge to interrupt, correct, or defend. Yet many struggle with this because the ego seeks to be heard more than it seeks to understand. When one person speaks and the other listens only to reply, not to comprehend, the exchange loses its meaning. The speaker may finish their words, but they leave the moment feeling unseen. Over time, this pattern creates emotional isolation. A person who feels unheard will gradually speak less. Their thoughts remain unshared, their feelings unexpressed. Silence begins to replace openness, not because there is nothing to say, but because there is no sense of being received. Even in a room full of family, one can feel alone when their voice does not find a resting place. Listening is more than the absence of speaking. It is an act of respect. It tells the other person without words that their experience matters. When someone is truly heard, their burden becomes lighter, even if no solution is offered. But when they are ignored or dismissed, even unintentionally, the weight of their thoughts becomes heavier. There is also a subtle harm in partial listening. Nods without attention, brief replies without understanding, these create an illusion of connection while deepening disconnection. The surface may appear calm, but underneath, frustration grows. The speaker senses the lack of presence and trust begins to fade. To restore harmony, one must first become aware of how they listen. This awareness reveals how often attention drifts and how quickly judgment arises. With this realization, a choice can be made to return to the moment, to hear without interruption, and to receive without resistance. It is a simple act, yet it carries great power. When listening becomes sincere, conversations begin to change. Words flow more freely, misunderstandings lessen, and a sense of closeness returns. People feel valued not because they are agreed with, but because they are acknowledged. This acknowledgement nourishes relationships in a way that advice or correction cannot. A peaceful home is not built only on kind words, but on attentive ears. When each person feels heard, the need to raise their voice fades. The heart softens and communication becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. In this space, connection grows naturally, and the silence that once divided begins to dissolve into understanding. Resentment builds when issues are not addressed. Small hurts, if ignored, accumulate over time and turn into long-term bitterness. Stored resentment grows quietly, often hidden beneath daily routines and polite exchanges. It does not appear suddenly, it forms from small moments: an unkind word, a broken promise, a feeling of being overlooked. At the time, these moments may seem too minor to address, so they are pushed aside. But what is ignored is not erased. It settles within, waiting, gathering weight over time. In many families, there is a habit of avoiding discomfort. Speaking about hurt feelings may feel risky, as if it could disturb the fragile balance of peace. So silence is chosen instead. Yet this silence is not peaceful, it is heavy. Each unspoken hurt becomes another layer, slowly building into something much larger than the original moment. Resentment changes how people see one another. A simple action may be interpreted through the lens of past pain. Words that were once harmless begin to feel loaded with meaning. The present moment is no longer experienced as it is, but as it is, colored by everything that was never resolved. This creates confusion because reactions seem stronger than the situation requires, yet their roots lie deeper. There is also a quiet distance that forms when resentment is held. Warmth fades, replaced by guarded interactions. Kindness may still exist, but it becomes measured and cautious. Laughter feels less natural and conversations lose their ease. The connection that once flowed freely becomes restricted, as if something unseen stands between people. Holding on to resentment also affects the one who carries it. It creates a constant tension within, even when nothing outwardly appears wrong. The mind returns to past events, replaying them, reinforcing the sense of injustice. This repetition strengthens the feeling rather than releasing it. Over time, it can turn into bitterness, which is far more difficult to dissolve. The path away from resentment begins with recognition. One must be willing to see what has been stored within without denying or justifying it. This requires honesty, not only about what others have done, but about how deeply it has been held. Once seen clearly, there is an opportunity to respond differently. Expression, when done with calmness and clarity, allows hidden pain to surface. It does not need to be harsh or blaming. Simply sharing how something felt can open the door to understanding. Often, the other person may not even be aware of the impact they had. In this exchange, what was heavy can begin to lighten. Letting go does not mean forgetting or approving of what caused the hurt. It means choosing not to carry it forward. When resentment is released, space is created for peace to return. The heart becomes less burdened and relationships regain their natural flow. A family does not break from a single moment of pain, but from the accumulation of many that were never healed. When those moments are faced with awareness and gently released, the quiet walls begin to fall and connection can breathe again. Ego and harsh behavior damage harmony. The need to be right, combined with unkind words, slowly destroys mutual respect and peace. Ego often enters quietly, yet its presence is powerful enough to disturb even the most loving environment. It does not always appear as arrogance. Sometimes it hides behind the simple need to be right, to be acknowledged, or to feel superior in a moment of disagreement. In a family where closeness should bring ease, ego can turn small differences into lasting conflicts. When the desire to be right becomes stronger than the desire to understand, conversations lose their purpose. Instead of seeking clarity, each person begins to defend their position. Words are chosen not to connect, but to win. In such moments, truth becomes less important than victory. Yet every victory gained through ego carries a quiet cost: the weakening of trust and harmony. Ego resists apology. It whispers that admitting fault is a sign of weakness, that holding ground is a form of strength. But this resistance creates distance. A simple "I was wrong" has the power to heal, yet it is often withheld. Without this humility, misunderstandings remain unresolved and the emotional gap widens. Harsh behavior often follows ego. When one feels challenged, the tone hardens and words lose their gentleness. Even a valid point, when expressed without care, becomes difficult to accept. The listener reacts not to the meaning, but to the manner in which it is delivered. This creates a cycle where both sides feel hurt, yet neither feels heard. There is also a blindness that comes with ego. It focuses attention inward on one's own perspective while ignoring the experience of others. In this state, empathy fades. The ability to see through another's eyes is replaced by the urge to prove oneself. This limits understanding and prevents true resolution. Peace requires a different kind of strength, the strength to soften, to listen, and to step back from the need to dominate a moment. When ego is set aside, even briefly, space opens for genuine connection. A person becomes more willing to ask, to clarify, and to accept that they may not always be right. Kindness in speech plays an essential role here. Words can either close hearts or open them. When spoken with patience and respect, even difficult truths can be received without resistance. The intention shifts from winning an argument to preserving the relationship. In a home where humility is practiced, conflicts do not disappear, but they lose their power to harm. Disagreements become opportunities for understanding rather than division. The need to be right fades, replaced by the desire to remain connected. Ego may feel strong, but it is fragile. It depends on constant defense and validation. True strength, however, lies in letting go of that defense. When this happens, harmony returns quietly, and relationships regain their natural balance, free from the weight of unnecessary struggle. Love requires daily effort and presence. Family peace survives through appreciation, forgiveness, time, and consistent small acts of care. Love within a family is often misunderstood as something that exists on its own, needing no effort to survive. In the beginning, it feels natural and effortless, expressed through spontaneous care and attention. But over time, as routines settle in and familiarity grows, this expression can begin to fade. Not because love has disappeared, but because it is no longer actively practiced. Presence is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways love is expressed. Being physically near is not enough. True presence means giving full attention. When someone speaks and the response comes with genuine interest, it creates a feeling of being valued. Without this attention, even the closest relationships can feel distant. A home may be filled with people, yet lack the warmth that comes from being truly seen. Appreciation is another quiet form of love that often goes unnoticed. Small acts, preparing a meal, offering help, showing concern, are easily taken for granted when they become routine. But when these acts are acknowledged, even with a few sincere words, they gain meaning. Gratitude has the power to renew energy in relationships, reminding each person that their efforts matter. Time is the space where love grows. Without shared moments, connection begins to weaken. It is not the quantity of time alone, but the quality that matters. A short, meaningful conversation can strengthen a bond more than hours spent without attention. When time is given freely without distraction, it nurtures trust and closeness. Forgiveness also plays a vital role in sustaining love. Mistakes are inevitable in any relationship, but holding on to them creates distance. When forgiveness is practiced, it allows the relationship to move forward without being weighed down by the past. It does not erase what happened, but it releases its hold on the present. Consistency is what transforms love from a feeling into a stable foundation. Occasional gestures are not enough to maintain peace. It is the repeated everyday expressions, kind words, patient listening, small acts of care that keep the connection alive. These may seem insignificant in isolation, but together they shape the emotional atmosphere of a home. When love is not practiced, it does not vanish suddenly, it quietly becomes less visible. The warmth decreases, the effort fades, and relationships begin to feel mechanical. But this process can always be reversed. By returning attention to small, intentional actions, love can be felt again in its full presence. A peaceful family is not one without challenges, but one where love is consistently expressed despite them. In such a place, care is not assumed but shown, and connection is not left to chance but nurtured daily. Through presence, appreciation, time, forgiveness, and consistency, love remains alive not as an idea but as a living experience.